Hey, it's Brian.
Hey, it's Nate.
Hey, it's Barry.
And welcome to the Collecti-Bros podcast. Today's episode, Is It Worth It? Splatterhouse on the Turbo Grafx-16. Before we get started, be sure to check us out on social media. We are primarily on TikTok, but we're on everything at Collecti-Bros Pod. Please join the Discord and conversate with us. We enjoy it quite a bit. Find us anywhere.
Links in the show notes.
Yes, links are definitely in the show notes in the episode description. Follow us on anywhere and everywhere at Collecti-Bros Pod. So what is Splatterhouse? Splatterhouse is a side-scrolling beat-em-up developed by Namco. It was also published by Namco in Japan. Over here in the States, in Europe, it was published by Sharp Image Electronics. It was a branch of Atari. So being published by Atari, it makes a lot of sense that this was originally an arcade game, since Atari was pretty much the king of the arcades at the time. But the home ports for this game is the Turbo Grafx-16, which is the version we're covering today, and also available in Japan on the good old FM Towns Marty, everybody's favorite home computer, right?
Yes, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
I know exactly what that is.
And also, believe it or not, the actual first home version of this game is a Tiger Electronics handheld that is exclusive to Japan.
Are you kidding me?
That's I wish crazy. I was. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And it's actually like a decent for an LCD. You gotta think, like, we're talking primitive Tiger handhelds. It actually represents the game pretty well. Like, it's very animated for the time.
That's crazy.
Could you imagine whipping that thing out from under your bathroom sink while you're trying to take a dookie? Trying to play Splatterhouse.
Can you imagine asking
Splatterhouse while splattering the house? I'll be here all day, folks.
I'm done. I'm out. Even though I started it.
I can't recover.
But yeah, like I said previously, the version we're going to focus here on today is the Turbo Grafx-16. I think it's the most notable home port. Obviously, it was released here in the States. The PC Engine in Japan. There are differences between the two, but I think most people are familiar with Turbo Grafx-16. We'll go over the differences when we get into our categories. But I think a lot of people consider this almost the Turbo Grafx-16 game. Obviously, the game had a lot of controversy when it came out. And then for them to be like, yeah, we're going to do a home port, it was kind of like put a stamp on the console itself. Because you got to think the Turbo Grafx-16 came out before the Super Nintendo and during the later era of the NES. So it's basically an NES competitor. And it's kind of the polar opposite of the NES. NES had a lot of like family-friendly, cartoony characters. And then the mainline game for Turbo Grafx-16 was this dude that wears a Jason mask and splats people with 2x4. So it kind of sets the tude in the 90s, in the 80s.
The tude was real.
Oh, yeah.
I lived it. So
as far as the Turbo Grafx-16 port, some history behind it. The Towns Marty version apparently is like arcade perfect.
That's surprising.
It's weird, though, because if you go back, a lot of like these Japanese computers have very, very good arcade ports. And we never really caught up with that here in the States until much later in console lives. Because the example I was thinking of was like, let's think of other arcade games at the time on the NES. You've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade. Like, it's a serviceable home port, but it's far, far, far inferior to the actual arcade unit.
Well, specifically, if we're going over like old computers for a moment, the Japanese ones, like their games were a lot better represented than the original product than like the European computers, like the ones we got, because we were far more console focused.
Well, it's fair too, because I mean, even the European computers, like a lot of them, what's the Sinclair?
Yeah,
didn't even have full color.
Spectrums, like
you got 3 colors was like the most popular computer over there.
And you look at this game on the Towns Marty, and it's like looks like an arcade game.
It runs great. It looks great. But that's the thing. This port gets shit on a lot. The biggest thing that people point to is the censorship, right? Basically, this game came out. There was nothing like it. It's horribly violent. 4 years before Mortal Kombat. And I mean, now it's so tame. It still got a mature rating when it was released on the Wii Virtual Console, which is weird. It's literally the only Virtual Console game that's rated mature. But it's very tame by today's standards. Yeah, there's monster blood that's green that splats, and you are beating the shit out of these enemies with 2x4s, but it's not that bad compared to some of the things today. It's not like it's human on human violence. It's pretty tame, but back then it was shocking. There was nothing like it. And there was a lot of like backfire to actually release this on home ports where like kids could play it, because the arcade, it wasn't available here in the States like it was in Japan and Europe. It was pretty successful in the arcades in Europe and Japan. I cannot find hard numbers, but there's a lot of evidence to point that there was only 100 arcade units shipped here in the States.
Wow.
But it's I've never seen an arcade in person. It's a pretty uncommon. I've seen a lot of builds off of boards, but not a lot of original.
Same. Yeah. It's not a cabinet you see a lot.
But as far as in terms of like gameplay, frame rate, I think this is a serviceable port. Like, it plays well, it looks well. The actual gameplay itself of Splatterhouse in this port, they did a great job, especially on a blooming console that they haven't had years to develop for like they have for the NES. Like, this is a super serviceable arcade port. And again, especially when you compare it to something like, everyone talks about the censorship of Splatterhouse, but the censorship of like Turtles arcade, you only get 2 turtles. The graphics are not great on the NES. It runs like ass if there's more than 3 characters on the screen. Compared to the NES, this is like a great arcade port, and I'll defend that.
Well, that's kind of the theme of the Turbo Grafx in general, though.
Just something that's kind of funny to point out here. There is actually a Splatterhouse game on the NES. It's unlike this game. I'm not going to try to pronounce this. It is Splatterhouse. I am going to try to pronounce this. Splatterhouse Wenapaku Graffiti. It's a chibi-style game. It's a basic NES action platformer, but it's nothing like the actual game. I just don't want people to get confused and be like, hey, there is an NES port. It's not the same game.
It's a Japan exclusive, correct?
Yeah, Famicom exclusive. Yeah. Yep. So the director of Splatterhouse, his name is Shigeru Yokoyama. I'm sure I got that right. He had a lot of development for like Mappy, Pac-Man. And at Namco, he realized like these cartoon characters were kind of what was pushing their arcade market, right?
Shout out to Mappy, really quick.
Yeah, shout out to old Mappy.
I love Mappy. I never thought I'd get to talk about it. Here we are, Mappy.
In the Splatterhouse episode of all episodes. But no, he realized that's what Namco was pushing. And then during this time and era in the United States, like slasher movies were like really becoming a thing. Friday the 13th, obviously this is heavily inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street. It was kind of like the new hot craze in the American market. So he was like, why don't we capitalize on this? Like, let's try something different that stands out in the arcades where it is violent, it is loud. And if you see the arcade marquee, like it's on the side of it, it's just like a bunch of like monsters and a dude with a big knife with a Jason mask. Like, it does stand out. It's all black. There's red accents for like blood. So the marketing strategy works really well in Japan and Europe. But like I said, we didn't get a lot of arcade units shipped here in the States. And the long spread rumor for this game is that it was banned in the United States. I can't find a lot of concrete proof that that's the case. And there's more evidence to suggest that due to licensing laws, right? They're really loose in the Asian market. And you literally have a dude that's wearing a Jason mask hitting people with a machete. I mean, it's Friday the 13th. So it's more likely than not that they ran into some...
They don't want that smoke.
Yeah. It's more likely than not there's a copyright claim. And that's why if you look at the censorship in the Turbo Grafx-16, one of the biggest notes is that he has a purple mask instead of a white mask. And it's like, hey, they probably did this to, help with censorship and all that. Or, copyright and all that.
I like how bland Jason is in a way where it's like you can see any dude with coveralls and a hockey mask and be like, that's Jason ripoff. And I'm like, okay, I guess. Let's copyright everything. That's fine. That's just how we function over here.
Is Casey Jones a Jason ripoff?
Put him in coveralls, and now he is.
Yeah, dude.
If it's no coveralls, it's Casey. If it is coveralls, it's Jason. And, you can't have the mask without...
It's like, what? He's actually got a hockey stick. He's allowed to wear a hockey mask. Like, hang on. Like, yeah, what are the rules? But
every single hockey player is a ripoff, dude. That's why they've got those fancy-looking ones now.
Yeah, that's really changed. That's why you gotta, personalize it so it doesn't look like a Jason mask. Yeah.
Can't be white.
Yeah. Yeah. Nope.
White's trademarked.
But if later on when they released it on the Wii U or the Wii Virtual Console, they actually changed the mask a little bit, though it made it more pointy. And on the box art for Splatterhouse 2 and 3, they kind of changed the design to make it not look as Jason-y. So, and there's a lot of evidence to support. That's why we had the arcade units halted. So kind of an interesting backstory, this one. I don't really know where the ban thing got started, but like even if you Google like banned video games, this is always like one of the first things that come up. And I think it's probably a product of its time. There wasn't anything, like I said, this is 4 years before Mortal Kombat, and like I was alive during Mortal Kombat. I remember how much people freaked out about that. Like, I don't think video games were quite where they were when Mortal Kombat came out because arcades were huge back then. So I think it's a different medium, but I'm sure at the time it was concerning, but now it's nothing now.
Well, you gotta think that also, we're basically saying this is a Jason ripoff, and it's funny because in America it's so funny where it's like movies specifically, we can't watch people just get ripped in half and eaten, but if you see a pair of boobies or a butt, you're getting an art, like the same equivalent, like in that movie. So it's like, for some reason you look at movies and like censorship's completely different, but like video games back then, it was like, if there's violence, like, oh, we can't have kids playing that, but it's like, well, you guys want to go watch Friday the 13th instead though? Like,
yeah, it's funny because like, on one hand they're like, oh, I don't remember really when censorship as far as ratings and whatnot came into play. I know it was a lot later for games.
it was
Like a lot later. But like for movies, especially now for movies, because I'm thinking in like a modern standard, it's like, okay, if it's not even like MA18, it's just mature and you need to show that you're over 18. And half the time they don't even care and they just let you go in.
Yeah.
And then if you can go watch a mature rated movie and bring your kids.
Yep.
Like I vividly remember going to see Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in theaters. And a woman in front of me had brought her 2 kids, and they had to have been 2 or 3 years old. And I was like, lady, do you not know about the very explicit scene that's in this? Yeah. And the whole time, like, that the scene's happening, I'm just like, why did they let you in here? Why? But then, like, on the other hand, they're like, well, you can't have Splatterhouse because, kids at home could see it on a home console. And I'm like, y'all don't care. You let them in the movies anyways.
Right. It's hilarious.
Like, it makes no sense.
Because you think how controversial this game is, it would come up in like the, court hearings in 92. Mm-hmm. It's like barely passed. Like, there's the special features for this game on the back. It's like, you can use powerful weapons or something like that. And it's just like, he reads the special features on the back of the game and that was it. And it's just for this game to be revered as this banned ultra violent thing, like, yeah, it did show up, but I guess because Mortal Kombat was around then.
And the brain fart, the Sega CD game.
Oh damn it,
Night Trap.
Yeah, thank you.
Night Trap and Mortal Kombat got a lot of the smoke, but Night Trap hilarious. It's way less violent than
Night
this.
Trap is nothing,
this is
bro.
way more violent.
Isn't Night Trap like a video?
Yeah, that's the thing. It looks real.
Okay.
And you're like moving the camera around, watching people
looks like
die.
real shit.
So yeah, yeah, it does.
I love Night Trap though.
I do too. But
yeah, this game was actually the first game to implement its own parental advisory warning. So on the bottom left of the cover, it says.
Kind of, but it's like taking
it's tongue in cheek. Yeah, but they got it out there.
It's like game may be content have sensitive for cowards.
Let me get the exact quote because it's pretty funny. It's quoting, "The horrifying theme of this game may be inappropriate for young children, ... and cowards." So
it's pretty good. I approve.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. For any CD, though, it's pretty great. Fun fact, Splatterhouse 2 was the first Sega game to implement. Sega had their own internal rating. So they had MA17 was their highest. Splatterhouse 2 got an MA17. But it was the first Sega game where they self-regulated their own rating system on the game.
It's so wild for me to like try to put myself in that mindset of like the 80s and 90s of how violence was. Because even like early 80s and especially 90s like horror films were very gruesome. And like that was the style and that's what people really liked. And like that was a very like, oh, sweet thing. And now like, 2023, we're so numb to literally everything on this planet that like nothing phases us. So trying to put my mindset into being like, y'all thought Splatterhouse was explicit. And I'm sitting here like, I guess you never had those kids on the school bus show you the dark web websites.
You got the Taliban beheading videos.
Yeah,
and stuff.
like I don't,
helmets on.
It's just so hard. It's an interesting thought to try and put yourself in that perspective, but it's so impossible for people our age now in this era because like you just can't. Like we're so numb to most everything at this point.
We got like tail into some of it when it was already like ratings and stuff were already established. But like I remember like if you look at like late 80s, early 90s movies, there wasn't PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
They had to do it because like you could drop F-bombs and stuff and still get a PG and.
The whole science behind the rating system is like for a whole nother day.
That's a whole,
yeah,
that's a whole. Is it worth it? But
it is interesting, like you're saying to your point, this was what was popular at the time, so it's okay in one medium of art, but it's not okay in the other medium of art. It's such a weird thing.
What year did the Splatterhouse come out again?
88.
88?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think it's weird also if we're talking about just censorship and ratings. Like comics did it way earlier than everybody else. It's super weird that like the comic books like ratings were like a huge thing. And then we went decades before, like, what about video games and movies? And obviously video games because they weren't around yet, but it's interesting how
movies didn't really start getting ready until
like a children's thing will latch onto it and it'll become a hot button issue. Like,
well, it's funny to think of like people, I want to say our age, like mid-20s, mid-30s, like early 40s, kind of in that sort of millennial age. Now talk about why they love, like, our diehard horror fans, like, love it so much. And I want to say the 2010s, 2000s, like, weren't really a great time for horror.
absolutely not.
Because it started to die out, but, like, it's getting a lot better in terms of, like, media. But
yeah,
those people now who are just such diehard fans, like, talk about stories of, like, their parents taking them to horror films. Like, taking them to the movies to, like, watch these, and they're horribly gory and gruesome, and they're all literally like, I probably shouldn't have watched this as a kid, but my parents didn't find anything wrong with it.
It's just the times, man.
And I'm just like, I've never heard of anybody converted being like, oh, my parents never let me watch horror movies as a kid, and now that I'm an adult, that's where my love comes from, out of spite. And I'm like, not a single person I know.
Right.
Literally all of them were like, yeah, my dad was really into them too, like we watched them together.
Right.
Not, no big deal about this woman who's entirely naked, just getting cut up and blood everywhere and whatnot. Like, no big deal. So it is very interesting to think about in that time, like, what was acceptable and what was not. And in the same deal of, like, what we think is acceptable at home as consumers versus who is making all these rules saying it can be banned.
Yep.
Like, you guys are not understanding. Where did you get that idea? Who told you this can't be good for kids?
Yep.
Did you take a poll? Because a poll would have showed you opposite. They would have said, we don't care.
Well, it's like the music industry argument, because it was kind of during the same time,
Don't tread on me.
Right. Like, I remember they had Ice Cube was doing an interview, and he was like, when they put the parental advisory sticker on our albums, like, they sold more. Like, yeah. It's because you make people want it. Like, what's the mystery? Instead of just listening to the thing themselves.
Shout out to Two Live Crew for saving the music industry in America.
Splatterhouse is definitely the Two Live Crew of
D. Snyder gets all the
Video
credit,
games.
but
Unlike-
Uncle Luke took all that smoke.
Unlike on one hand, you could stew up some kind of conspiracy theory about how the reverse human psychology works. If you put a label on it, like you said,
Right.
it will sell more. But then, like, if you put a label on it and then not even make it accessible, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so Splatterhouse just, like, wasn't accessible.
Anybody got anything else? It's a good spot to
No, it's good. It's a good pick. It's an obscure game, but it's like it is like the start of a lot of that stuff, and there's a lot to digest with it. So it's a good pick, Brian.
The weird, interesting contrast to this game is how simple this game is, but I have more notes on this game than any other game ever. This thing's like 9 pages long.
Bro, we're going to be here for 4 days.
But yeah, there's a lot of meat as far as the interesting things of this game, not necessarily just like the gameplay. It's a simplistic arcade game, but there's a lot of actual discussion around it. So the story for this game, now there's actually, you think it would be stupid, simplistic arcade, but this is actually some research I did, which I didn't know somehow, combining two of my favorite things that I love to collect. I was blown away. I was so excited. It was like that meme of like the otter holding the guitar and be like, look guys, this is cool. Like, so much like that.
Is this early 2000s Facebook meme?
Maybe.
Oh, no.
Old, showing my age. But yeah, so the story for this game, the arcade mode, they don't go over stories in arcade. They want you to put your quarter in and play it. So the way they got around this and added more to the story for the home port is in Fantastic Four, issue number 346. There's a 2-page splash ad, and it's done in like a comic book style that tells the story for this game. I thought it was really cool. Like, it's pretty unique marketing strategy. Like, if you look at similar, video game advertisements from the era, it'll probably be like the box art really big. Might have a couple screenshots.
It's usually always in the back cover. Too.
Yeah, or it's just randomly 1 page. To have a 2-page spread where it's actually like a full-blown comic book, like, it's freaking awesome.
It's really cool.
I immediately was like, all right, I have to go find this issue.
That was the only issue? Like, nothing else in Marvel at that time that was printing had the same ad?
So I'm sure it is in other books, but this is the only one, like, concrete I know. Yeah. I mean, honestly, that'd be a cool little subset to have. So, like, if anybody else knows, like, please let me know, because I want all of them.
You assume it's the same ones that came out that month, right?
Yeah. I don't know, because marketing and things were different back then. Like, they didn't have the time to build up the hype. You might got, maybe a month, 2-3 months.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't internet where 3 years
Right.
before stuff's coming out. You had to, like, advertise try to time it up when you could actually go out and do it and see it.
But yeah, honestly, the artwork it's really cool for this. Actually, we're gonna share it in the Discord when this comes out. But yeah, the artwork's really cool in this. It's almost like a Silver Age style, where it's a super expressive faces and you have like the swooping animation. It's not like a Kirby style where it's like bombastic, but it fits of the time. It's almost like a Silver Age horror like EC book, and like it's awesome. Like even at the end, like the last panel, she's like talking directly to the consumer, and it's got the Turbo Grafx logo. Like it's just a really cool little thing that I didn't know about, quite frankly. And combined two of my favorite mediums, I thought it was just awesome. I might be lame, I don't care. I think it's really unique and it's really cool. We'll share this in the Discord and put it on the socials or whatever so y'all can see it. But it's definitely worth checking out. It's definitely a unique thing. And something like, Sony or Atari wouldn't do at the time. This is like another weird, like trailblazing moment for Turbo Grafx. Like something so small, but they were willing to take risk and like they had to. Like they were the underdog their whole console life. So good on NEC. I thought that was really interesting, really cool. But the story itself, you play as Rick. You're hanging out with your girlfriend Jennifer. It starts raining, so you enter the Splatterhouse. So as we talked about, they used this ad to flesh out the story for the home port. The arcade version's really simplistic. You basically just enter the house, your girlfriend screams, you wake up with this mask on, you start splatting things, you save your girlfriend, blah, blah, blah. So the whole advertisement basically gives a backstory to these characters, and combined with the manual of the game, it goes in depth, and it's a nice little touch that they didn't necessarily do back then. It's kind of cool for the home port to give you that extra story. Like they didn't have to do that. Like this is something that they did that was kind of above and beyond, and it was completely unnecessary, but I truly appreciate it. So the home port and manual, it gives the main characters a last name. It expands on the location of like why they just wind up in this house. We'll go over it. It's more in depth than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it ended up spawning like a series, and the Splatterhouse story is actually a little more meaty than you would expect.
Yeah. So literally the arcade, it's literally just screenshot like a FMV of them walking into the house because it's raining. They're like, we have to get out of this rain. And you go in this house and yeah, like I said, you wake up and start splatting. But in the Turbo Grafx-16 game, according to the manual, Rick and Jennifer, which are given the last names Rick Taylor and Jennifer Wills, they're local university students, and they're studying parapsychology, which if you don't know, because I sure as hell didn't, it's a study of mental phenomena which are excluded from or incapable by orthodox scientific psychology, such as...
Give me third grader speak.
Hypnosis and telepathy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I had to copy and paste a Webster's definition for that one.
I could tell.
Yeah. Is it that obvious? I'm educated. But yeah, the doctor, the mansion you're going to is actually referred to as West Mansion, and it's the residence of Dr. West. That's got to be a Reanimator reference, right? We're talking about how this is horror inspired. That's clearly a Reanimator reference.
No, it's a ripoff, just like Jason. What are you talking
probably.
about?
But yeah, he's basically rumored to be working on experiments before his death, and he's gone missing, so assume that he's dead. Since Dr. West is the leading authority of their field, which I'm not going to try to pronounce again, Rick and Jennifer actively travel to the house instead of trying to avoid the rain.
Just proves, don't do your homework, guys. Get you killed.
The manual of the Turbo Grafx-16 version expands on, the lore of the mask also. The arcade doesn't go into it. You just wake up with this mask on and start killing shit. The manual says that it is a legendary artifact which contains a spirit that grants the users supernatural powers and given the name the Terror Mask, which it's expanded upon even more in the later games. But it just kind of adds to it because, if you don't... And then again, story is not super important to these arcade games, but going back and filling in some of these gaps, I think it's a cool little touch that they did not have to do at all, and it adds a lot to it. I'm not saying it's a great story or whatever. It's pretty bare bones. But
I always appreciate the effort because back then it just wasn't necessary for games. And they were viewed as, especially an arcade game, it's viewed as a moneymaker and gameplay's the hook. So anytime they do it, it's cool. It's not necessary, like you said, but
yeah. And the fact that they actually expanded on it and tried to flesh out these characters and they give you the visual aid with the comic book ad, is nothing really like it. As far as the story unraveling itself within the game, once you enter the house with Jennifer, She screams, except she doesn't scream in the Turbo Grafx version because there's no screaming in the game as part of the censorship. So the comic lies to you. But that's fine. You wake up with this terror mask attached to your face, and it basically compels you to like kill every creature in the house.
Splat.
Yeah, you just start splatting things and killing things. You're going through this, quote, house, because the house is way bigger than it is on the screenshot. It's got sewers and shit in it, but you're making your way through it, and like halfway through the game, you kind of realize that the house is like alive. It's an entity. You end up crawling through its like birth canal. It's pretty gross. But you end up finding your girlfriend. She's like possessed. You have to kill her. She's a big monster. The house.
She's like a giant baby.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. The the birth canal shit is nasty. I'm just gonna say it. Like they splat white and they ooze and it just ugh. But yeah, you basically go through different sublevels of the house. You make your way to the final living house spirit, kill it. That's your game. It's a typical arcade game, man. Like there's not a lot of meat on the bones, and I really do think them trying to make it more than just kill shit for the home port. It's great. It's something that is a positive of the Turbo Grafx port. The actual ending for this game, it's pretty funny. It's like a kind of like 1970s Hulk series moment where after you defeat the main boss, the mask like shatters into a million pieces and you walk away and it starts doing the piano music all slow like the 70s Hulk exit. But the difference between the Turbo Grafx version and the arcade version is the arcade version, the mask like reassembles and laughs at the player. It doesn't happen in the Turbo Grafx-16 version. I don't know if that's like a technical issue, for not having, because it has a smaller cutscene in the beginning of the game. And
wait, are you saying it does reassemble in the arcade, but not in
the sequel? Yeah, it doesn't really do it.
But again, it could have been like a weird censorship thing with like, I don't want to say spirits and stuff, but you fight spirits in the game. Like there's possessed poltergeist chairs, chandeliers. So I don't know if it was a limitations thing or if it was a censorship thing.
Oh, it reassembles in the arcade. So the next person who puts a quarter in can do it.
There you go.
Metagame.
The loop.
But yeah, the cutscenes, other than that ending one, are pretty identical in the Turbo Grafx-16. The exception is when it shows the house like running in, it doesn't show them physically enter the house on the Turbo Grafx-16. So that's the biggest changes here. Like everyone wants to talk about how much this game's censored. Some of the sprites and the graphics, definitely, there's no arguing there. But as far as like your story, we're getting more story content. We're getting fleshed out characters. I don't understand why this game gets just destroyed for butchering the arcade version, because it really adds so much more to it in this regard.
The long time history born excuse of, well, that's what the devs intended.
Yeah.
So why would you change it? That's blasphemy.
We're not going to have any Splatterhouse blasphemy around here.
Yeah.
Like, relax.
That's not how it was in its intended state.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's not be like better.
It's another example though of some of these arcade games. They don't. No other company or manufacturer, however you want to put it, would do something like this. It's just weird little things like this, and the Turbo Grafx just full of them. And they do it for their, I don't want to say flagship title, but it's like one of the Turbo Grafx titles. It's interesting. It's unique. It's cool. It stands out. It adds to the mystique of this game for me. So let's jump into the gameplay. As stated previously, it's a simple arcade beat 'em up. You can't move up or down. You can only go left and right. You can jump, but there's no. It's not like Double Dragon, or it's not like Streets of Rage where you can go back and forth in the foreground. It's literally a left or right beat 'em up.
Side scrolling to the fullest extent.
You can duck, right?
Yeah, you can duck. You do have some abilities like a beat 'em up. You can duck. You can jump, because the enemies will come at you on different planes, right? Just not in different foreground or background. You can punch while you're jumping to get an upper, to hit the bats and whatnot. You can slide, you can kick. There's different attacks you can do. There's tons of weapons, and the weapons for this game are fantastic. The fun thing about the weapons in this game is like they're so damn satisfying.
They are very rewarding. And
it's kind of interesting too. One of the censored items in the game is like the machete is the main weapon in the arcade version. All the machetes except for the one in level 4, which they made gold, which was an axe in the arcade that they turned into a machete in this game, but I don't understand that one. But all the machetes in like the early levels and the later levels, like every other normal machete has been turned into a 2x4, which if you've familiar with the series, that's like the icon. That's like the Doom shotgun of Splatterhouse. Like it is the most iconic weapon of Splatterhouse. Like even if people don't know this game, like I'm sure you're familiar with. That's the game with the 2x4. Like yes, and it is so damn satisfying to smack these monsters with that 2x4. The controls super simple. I mean, you've got your number 1 button that jumps, number 2 button that attacks. But the fun thing with the Turbo Grafx, if you all don't know, I don't know how familiar everybody is with this console, is it has turbo switches. So you can do this awesome thing where you can basically set like a rapid fire on a normal controller for the Turbo Grafx. So it makes you turn into like a Dragon Ball Z character where you're just slapping people hyperspeed fast, and it is fun to do in this game. I know when I first started playing it, Nate was watching me and he was laughing at me because I was in the corner just doing like the Dragon Ball Z instant transmit fighting. But I was like, yeah, dude, I'm cheating. I got the turbo switch on, I'm holding the button. It makes you attack really, really fast, and it helps. I would say it helps overall.
Nothing like crouching in a corner and facing the way where things are flying at you and just spamming.
Yeah. But again, that's
so enjoyable.
It is it's a feature that's exclusive to the Turbo Grafx version of this game. You can't do that in the arcade. You got to sit there and mash away. So it is something else to point out. It's kind of interesting. Kind of a, I don't want to say quality of life, but it's definitely a more player-friendly feature.
Saved your fingies.
Definitely saves your fingers.
Well, they're not getting constant quarters from you at home, so they don't care.
They're like, yeah, just flip the switch, literally. But yeah, that's my favorite technique in the game is literally finding a spot, crouching, hitting left and right, and holding that button, and just karate kicking and punching the shit out of everything.
So your favorite technique is cheesing.
Yeah, I love that cheese, bro. The game, it's pretty simplistic. You go right to left. There's enemies that attack you from the right, the top, the bottom. Every once in a while, it might throw a curveball at you and have them come from the left side of the screen. But it's only in certain parts we encountered that. It's a very simplistic game where you can memorize the patterns and you can get through it once you learn the patterns.
I'm going to say this, though. You got to think of it. It was designed as an arcade game. So when you're designing an arcade game, what do you want? You want something simplistic that hooks you in, that's satisfying. I think this game has all of those.
Yeah, like the combat's rewarding. It's simple, but it's like most of the enemies only take 1 or 2 shots.
And unlike a lot of arcades, I don't feel like any death was super cheap on here, except for some of the bosses. But
yeah,
playing a normal game, like, you don't feel like you can't beat it, which that's a lot of thing with arcade games, especially like beat 'em up style games. So it's just, you're going to get to a point where it's like, I have to die here because I have to put more quarters in, or etc. This one is actually like pretty balanced.
Yeah, I'll second that. I do wish they would kind of do more to mix it up. The only things I can think of gameplay-wise where they mix up the play of the game is some of the levels will scroll for you, so you can't go at your own pace, and there might be like a hole you have to jump over, or a spot where it can hurt you, like a splat or an acid drop. The variety of the game, there's not a lot of meat in the bone as far as the variety. You're just gonna punch and kick and splat and kill. That's pretty much the game. So once you master that, there's not a lot of variety. That's my only real knock on the gameplay itself.
It's with the length of the game, though. This, like, full disclosure, this is not a long game.
No.
Which will get brought up multiple times probably later in discussion, but I think it fits with the length of the game. It doesn't overstay its welcome. You're not sitting there. Some of the beat 'em ups, like, Barry, remember when you and me played Aliens vs. Predator, and I thought it was going to be an hour, and it turned to like 3 hours because we were just sitting there just mashing buttons like Galloping Ghosts, and I was like, I'm sorry I dragged you into this.
I don't remember my time there. It was all lost. Time was irrelevant, so I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't think it overstays its welcome like some beat 'em ups, and that one's generally regarded as like one of the best ever, and it's too long.
Yeah,
not to go on another tangent, but this game, I think it's like the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think it fits better. Like I said, it's an arcade port, but I do wish there was some more variety in terms of that. Like there is some weapons, but the weapon placement, it's usually melee based weapons. The weapons are really, really satisfying. Like I said before, like you do feel like a badass once you pick up a 2x4 and start splatting things. But again, like the 2x4, you hit an enemy once they die, you punch an enemy once and they die. So if we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it, they're not really necessary. They do give you extra reach and you can, hit multiple enemies at once with it. But it is very, very satisfying once you do splat something with 2x4. I'll say that. I wish there was a variety of gameplay though, because the only other sort of variety is that there's alternate paths, which is kind of cool. I haven't seen that in a lot of beat 'em ups, where you reach the end of a level, you might be able to fall down into a hole. It won't kill you. You'll just wind up in the sewers, and those are usually bullshit. Like, fuck the sewers. But it does add a different variety of gameplay. You're jumping over more obstacles when you're in the sewers. There's different enemy types, which overall I think they did a great job with that. There is a variety of enemies. Sprites, however, most of them are, hey, they're going to fly straight at you. They're going to walk straight at you. They might splat acid when they die. As far as the variety itself of the gameplay, there's only so much you can do with a beat 'em up, especially for the time, but I do appreciate the alternating paths. Like, that's unique. There might be ladders you can climb up. You can go down some ladders. So they made an effort, I feel like, overall.
Even with the branching paths, though, I feel like you were forced.
Yeah.
Your hand was forced on a lot of them. And I can see Nate's point of having a shorter game be an arcade style. And even if it was shorter, they want you to still come back. So it can't be too long because you're going to get frustrated playing the game all day, but you don't want to be too short because, like, once you beat the game, you're going to move on to another cabinet. So I feel like the idea of having branching paths is cool for an arcade because once you go through it, you can be like, well, I want to play it again to see what that hole was.
Right.
But there were so many parts in the game where we were forced into the hole because of some garbo. Yeah. So, we never got the opportunity to go over the ladder. Even if you stick a landing, next thing you know, the sprite is slipping down the hole. And I'm like, how did we get in the sewers again? Like, we thought we cleared that jump, and it was like, no, you were a pixel off.
I remember it's funny.
Like, what?
Yeah, I was playing once, and then, I fell down the hole, and I saw you two look at each other, and I was like, you try it, Nate. And then you tried it, immediately did it. I'm like, see, it's like you have to get the jump perfectly. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
I think Nate only made it over that hole once.
Yeah.
We all went,
One time.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Like I said, I appreciate the effort, but one of my knocks on this game is I wish there was a little bit more variety. But it's a very fair point, Barry.
Or even, I'll take more variety in other stages. Like, the only other branching paths you got was one ladder up, I think, at one point, and then mostly sewer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, bro, we, as a collective of video game people, we need to stop accepting sewers in our games.
Yes. Water levels.
I'm so tired of sewers.
We all hate water levels.
These sewers were rough, too. Jumping over those stupid Koopa shells was annoying because the timing just had to be perfect. And there was times where it's like, oh, I'm going to intentionally try to avoid the sewers to make it easier. And then we got stuck with that one boss who could, respawn the enemies. And I was like, okay, screw this. I'm going back in the sewer.
Dude, every game's got to have a sewer now. And I'm like, no, please. We're over it.
TMNT's hot right now.
It's 2023. We don't need sewers.
Still on the sewer kick from 30 years ago. That's crazy.
Every single RPG on the planet has a sewer and a desert. Hands down. Every single one.
Yep. I'm not going to argue against you.
I'm over it.
How'd you guys feel about the boss fights, though?
Cheap.
Yeah, so this is where the game...
What was it, the Scarecrow Ghost one?
That mother...
That one.
The chainsaw arms? He's on the cover of the game if you guys are
No, not the chainsaw arm one.
Oh,
the
he
one
was
where
cheap,
he's
too.
got
the
little...
resurrected one. Yeah, that was
that one.
Yeah,
where the enemies will come off screen.
Yeah.
It's where
that you can't move to.
The most like an arcade game where it was going to eat your money was the boss fights. Like, I don't feel like any of us really struggled with the normal level part until we got the bosses. That's when you're just like, oh shit, here we go.
I agree. I will say, I do appreciate how every boss was unique. It was different. Like the first boss you fight, it's the dude with the chainsaw arms that's big. But you can do the shotgun trick where you get it across the path and you can hit him with the shotgun.
Poltergeist House is the first one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, see?
Which, that's almost a different type of gameplay. You're not scrolling. It's like the level's locked, and I want to say furniture and stuff attack you in the room. So it's it's not a sprawling level. You're trying to figure out where to dodge attacks and where to hit attacks on whatever comes to life in you. So boss fight specific is kind of where the gameplay changes a little bit, but you're still just fighting.
Yeah, most of the bosses you're locked in one room. There's some, like Barry was talking about, the one that resurrects enemies, and then the heads.
Well, you're locked in one room. At the end of that one, once you get to that boss fight,
that's
you're locked at the end of the room, and so I don't know, are they skeletons or something?
I don't remember.
They're there's a boss that I think he looks like a scarecrow. I could be totally freaking wrong.
It's a scarecrow.
He's flying around up top. And then he's got these little enemies, and I want to say they're ghouls or skeletons or just your normal fodder. There's 3 of them to start, and you can kick them and down them, and he'll resurrect them. So what we did initially was back ourselves to the back, because it doesn't pain. You can't go left and right anywhere. You're locked in that one room. So we would back ourselves up against the corner and let the little dudes come at us to punch them, and then try and get the guy out of the sky. And then next thing you know, a skeleton dude comes off screen and attacks you from behind. And I'm like, That's why is that allowed?
Yeah.
I can't go back there. Why is the skeleton? And then there's like 6 of them doing it. I'm like, man.
He was
Forget
cheap
this one.
until I figured out the trick for him. So the trick for him is you got to keep the 3 initial skeletons in front of you, knock them, and then the boss will go to the left side of the screen. If you don't follow him, that one behind you is going to get you. So if you can hit him twice when he's on the left side of the screen, he'll pick the guys back up as he's going right, so you kill the guys again and then punch him on the right side. But yeah, if you didn't know, like that was your quarter stealing moment for sure.
It's messed up.
That was an evil level. That level was the biggest.
Messed up.
That was the most level in the game.
He was the standout boss where it was like, I need a cigarette, need to take a minute. I don't even smoke.
Now the chandelier one's funny though.
Yeah,
Yes.
I thought that
funny.
was a unique, fun boss fight because it starts out with like the room comes alive and like knives start attacking you at different angles. Like the first knife you've got to punch, the second knife you've got to kick, and then like the chairs come alive and start spinning. And it was funny because I think Nate was playing that part first, and I was like, I had a flashback memory of when I played this game because forever it was like the only Turbo Grafx game I had, so like I played the shit out of this game. And I was like, Nate, the chandelier's gonna fall. And he's like, what? And I was like, move the chandelier! And like the chandelier comes straight down on top of him, like he missed it. It was cool though.
Quarter stealer right there.
It's funny 'cause I played this game, I just forgot about it.
Right.
So.
What was it? There was one stage where was it when we were playing in hard mode, and Brian got to that fight, and you finally like beat the fight, and you were like so excited. You were like, yeah. And I remember being like, move, and you were like, what? And like you barely got out of the way just in time, but you completely forgot that the chandelier was going to come down, and Nate back there screaming too. But I'm just like, get out of the way. Your hopes and like part of me almost wished I didn't say anything because that would have been
streaming
so
it, don't
funny.
say anything. That would have been like, this is gonna be hilarious. But yeah, the boss fights are definitely, I think, one of the highlights for the game for me, honestly. Just it adds a variety of like I said, I was looking for variety. I think the boss fights are where they do shine because they're all different. And the strategies to beat them are different. Like I said, the chainsaw guy, I actually really like him. I think he's cool looking. The sprite's huge. And it's the first like big boss that's actually like a being you encounter. In most games back then, especially beat 'em ups, like that fight, any other game, he would have had a health bar that was the size of the whole screen. And you'd have to just keep hitting him and keep hitting him and keep hitting him. In this game, it gives you a shotgun and it's like, unload on him. And he'll jump over the shotgun. And if you miss with that shotgun, like you're going to have to hit him a couple times. So there's a trick you can do where you can bring 2 shotguns and fight him. I tried doing that, but I messed up my last jump. So I had 1 shotgun, but like it was pretty rewarding when I was like, I've got to hit him 1 time. So I karate kicked him in the face, and like it was really, really rewarding when you beat some of these big, scary bosses. And once the first time I got that scarecrow one you were talking about, yeah, that was jubilation right there because he was tough. And then even like the final boss, like he's really unique too. There's a section where basically the mansion's on fire because, well, once you're in the embryonic sac of the mansion that's alive, which is disgusting. In the arcade version, it's like embryonic fluid, which they censored it on the Turbo Grafx, so it turns into fire, which I guess is better. I don't know. That's a censor, but it starts the whole mansion on fire, and you have to jump over these flaming logs in the beginning. That was really rewarding too. Like I pro'd that shit and looked at Nate. I was like, don't ask me to do that again because I clutched it. And then the boss, he comes out of the ground and he's like this huge head with like these hands and these arms that attack you. Just the boss variety was great. And I think the overall enemy variety was solid, but again, when you're fighting them, you kind of fight them the same way. It's 1 hit and they go down. Usually there's some that take 2. But the bosses really shine for me. They were all played unique. And like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's kind of just memorizing a pattern. But just the uniqueness of every single boss fight, it felt like, oh, here we go. This is a boss fight. It's going to be like, let's get ready. Nice little touch. On to the graphics. Hey, what did you guys think about the graphics? I know, Barry, you're kind of like the least experienced with some of these older games.
Yeah, I don't
It's your first
really,
Turbo Grafx game, right?
Yeah, I don't know anything about Turbo. Like, what is it comparable to?
So that's the thing. Like, this is an NES competitor.
Well, didn't you say it's an NES competitor that runs 16-bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's unique. Like, it has that look to it. It's cool to ask you because this is the first one you've played. What'd you think?
It was more detailed than I thought it was going to be, but I don't think it was as detailed as what something like a Genesis or a Super Nintendo could do.
Right.
So to think that it was basically an NES competitor on a 16-bit system, it seemed like it kind of pushed what that system could do.
Yeah.
I don't know if they could get any better than what they got. So on one hand, like, I think it looked really good. But comparing it to the NES, I was not impressed with it in something like Bubble Bobble.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bubble Bobble is really a great example of that time period, pushing to the limits.
Right?
Yeah, part 2. Because when we played that one, I was like, there's no way this is an NES game.
We were all shook.
But in comparison to this one, if you were like, this is an NES competitor with a 16-bit system, I'd be like, okay, that's exactly what I would have thought. I don't think it would have gotten any better. So, not to say I wasn't impressed by it, but it wasn't some mind-blowing, wow, this is the best Turbo thing I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen pictures of other Turbo games, or I've just never actually played them.
Yeah.
So it looked good. Like, the colors looked good. I don't know if that was our upscaler or not.
Yeah, it might have been.
Well, no, we didn't use the
an
upscaler.
upscaler.
Oh, yeah,
It was RF.
that's true,
That's
yeah.
the thing with this. I was going to specifically say we're talking RF. We're not talking
Yeah, that is a good
Yeah,
point.
I
For the
didn't think
RF, it was pretty impressive.
like we first got the picture to finally work on the TV. We all went, wow, this looks like seriously good.
Hmm. I do remember when we played Bubble Bobble Part 2, we did it with an upscaler. No, we didn't. We did it with the RF because my top loader isn't an AV, and then we did it with the Retron.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we did. Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, the RF still looked really good. I just think the colors on the Retron were better.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
So for that comparison, I think the colors for Splatterhouse were very done. Very well done.
Yeah. I think the weakness for the Turbo Grafx itself, because like graphically it plays like the arcade version, but there's animation frames missing in this. Like Bubble Bobble 2 example, like the little details like the walking and the flying animation, like the animations, they're serviceable. There's nothing wrong with them. But for me, the big standout in the Turbo Grafx is like the sprites. Like if you look at for the time, like Turtles Arcade's the best example because it's also an arcade port. Your main character sprites are big, but all your enemies are really small and they're not detailed. But the sprite work in this game is awesome, and it's technically a cartridge. For you that don't know, Turbo Grafx games come on a Hue card. It's literally like a credit card size thing you slide into the machine, but it's a cartridge. And the sprite work's huge for a cartridge game. They're all pretty detailed. They're not as detailed as the arcade, obviously. But it's the first thing I noticed is like, damn, these sprites are big and chunky.
Yeah, I would say the sprites and the background details were good, but I do agree with the missing animation steps where like it
can
just
tell.
wasn't smooth.
Yep.
It was like if he was walking or turning or whatever, or hitting something with the 2x4, especially with the 2x4, you can see it. It's like a 1, 2, 3 frame instead of something really detailedly smooth. It wasn't horrible. It was just
It's a compromise.
lacking. It was lacking in quality that other parts of it had more of.
I think your point when you said earlier, it's like it's a 16-bit console, but it's competition to NES. It is like it doesn't have the processing power of like a Super Nintendo or Genesis, so you can't compare it to that fairly. But you can't really compare it to an NES either because it's clearly like.
Well, even then, like, is it the graphics that are chugging down the processing power? Because if you take that same comparison with Bubble Bobble Part 2, like the animations were smoother,
Right? Yeah.
and visually it was still stunning.
Turbos
So
are
I'm-
like this weird thing.
So I'm wondering, like, where I'm assuming it was more detailed across the board, so it probably sucked some power out of that. I'm assuming that's something that they valued more than animation was detail in the environment. Because, I mean, it is a horror game.
Yeah.
And, like, to get immersed in a horror story and something scary, like, it can't just be a castle wall
Yeah.
with some, I don't know, blood pools on the ground. Like, it's got to be, for what they wanted, gruesome.
I think that's definitely like a factor in the size of the sprites and stuff too. You had to get that right.
Yeah.
Especially if you're bringing it home. Like that's the thing it needs to retain is the size of the sprite so you can see the ghouls and stuff and all the gore.
Another weird thing to touch on, then we'll get back to the graphics, but talking about the comparison between this and the NES, like Turbo Grafx has a CD add-on attachment for the console. It's such a weird, unique console, dude. But that's what makes it fun. That's why I like collecting for it. But back to the graphics. The second thing that stands out to me is just like the level of violence. But this, just like splat, they hit the wall and then they turn the guts and they drip down the wall, and just like the horrific creatures and monsters. Like, look at horror games on the NES at the time. Like, you've got, let's look at Friday the 13th on NES. Like, it's not like this. It's
The only one with any, what's it called? The light gun one.
yeah, it's Chiller.
Chiller is like the only one comparable, but like Chiller does not look as good as this.
Yeah.
Like Chiller was like just the shockingness of it. Like they really went there.
Like, this is so tame now, but I can imagine back then. This is before Mortal Kombat. Like, this was the most violent thing on the market as far as, like, just showing innards, blood and guts. And if you go in a time capsule, there's literally nothing else like it on the market. So I'm sure if you walked by a store and this was hooked up and it was running, you'd be like...
Putting it in that perspective, there wasn't anything else on the market because I don't think anything technologically was able to do it. So it probably was the only thing that could run the next level.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have Mortal Kombat on the Nintendo, right?
Nope.
No.
So we didn't get Mortal Kombat until Super Nintendo, where we've moved on to 16-bit. So it probably was the only thing capable of doing something in that detail. Like, imagine making this game. What's the Frankenstein one on NES? Buster or something?
There's a Frankenstein's Castle is like an NES.
Maybe that's what I don't know. There's like a Frankenstein-ish Fester's something.
Fester's Quest.
Fester's Quest.
It's Adam's Family, yeah.
Like, it's a lot.
There's creatures
Less,
and shit.
there's creatures, but it's so much less detailed. And if they wanted to put any kind of gore in a game like that, it would have been like 3 red pixels, and you would have moved on. So.
Yeah, because like he was saying, it's Friday the 13th on NES is goofy. It's not scary at all.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
so
Texas Chainsaw on Atari is scarier than Friday the 13th on NES.
I'll second that.
Like,
and it's the same idea as when we moved into the 90s with practical effects. Like, in my opinion, practical effects in the 90s movies were far superior.
Oh, yeah.
They held up really well, even so much better than a lot of CG stuff they do today.
we're all in agreement on this.
And so it's that kind of idea of like you didn't know it until someone did it for the first time and nobody else was able to catch up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the best looking gory game we've ever got.
Yeah.
It literally was the only system that could probably do something like that.
It's true. Maybe y'all should order about banning the system instead of technology instead of the game.
So Chiller came out in 90, so it was after this. But like this is Chiller on NES. Like
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like MS Paint blood,
MS
dude.
Paint,
Like
right.
it's just like a couple pixels.
It's more shocking. That's like because this is the beginning of the level is this, and then you shoot them to that bloody pulp. So like not.
Yeah, it's not.
More just the shocking. Like I'm shooting a guy that's strapped to a wall. Then like all this is like this looks good.
But again, at least that's like human on human violence, which I think is way more concerning than these horribly mutated creatures that you're killing. Like, sorry, was I supposed to give him a martini before I kill him? Like, what's the controversy? Like, yeah, it's gory, but it's not like human red blood. It's green.
Right.
Even in the arcade version, it's like green blood. Guess what? Living things have guts in them. It's called biology. Like,
well, they're the undead though.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But even then, that's what stands out to me is like the big sprites and then just how, for the time, it probably was shocking for the time. Now it's
an eye-catcher, man.
so tame now. Like, how did this get a mature rating on the Wii? Can someone answer that for me? It's for blood and violence.
Policy standards, whatever. I don't know.
I mean, they put Doom
the
out.
Fetuses, probably.
Yeah, but it's the Turbo Grafx version. So the Turbo Grafx version, there's no... Well, they alter the fetuses.
They're fetuses.
They're clearly fetuses, but the sprite's altered. But it's clearly a fetus. But it's a monster fetus. It's not like you're not committing abortion, you know?
It's a fetus. It's 100% a fetus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that actual boss itself's like a giant fetus. But on the Turbo Grafx, again, he's altered. But it's
the boss is the placenta.
You in a birth canal fighting these fetuses, bro. Like, for real. Yeah. But even that's late in the game. Like, these people that are so worried about it, they ain't going to make it that far. Come on. Like, we had to skip one boss.
It did.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the graphics stand out for the time. They're interesting. They're unique. It's big, cool sprite work. If you're into sprite work, like, it's worth peeping and checking out a video.
I personally think the graphics are like the highlight of this game.
Yeah.
I think they just stand out.
I think, for me personally, I think it's like the meatiness of the weapons and like the satisfaction of splatting some way through 2x4s that stand out for me. But graphics are probably number 2 for me. So let's talk about the sound and the music. Let's cover the music a little bit first, because the sound, in my opinion, it's a little lackluster. But the music was composed by Katsuro Tajima. Again, apologies in advance, sir. He was known for his work on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Ace Combat 5, Tekken 5, Tekken 7, so pretty decent resume. I know the Smash...
Did he do like one stage on Smash?
It is Tekken stuff, probably.
No, he did all of the Game Boy... Or, I'm sorry, the 3DS version. He did all of that. And he did like a lot of the tracks for the Wii U version.
Interesting.
Wow.
No, I guess he's pretty renowned. Like, there was a lot of people really talking up his
All
body
of
of
the
work.
original sounds? Because I know a lot of the times when
original
they put
soundtrack, yeah.
stages.
And,
Okay.
yeah.
And then I believe a couple of like the mixes, he was the one that kind of like orchestrated.
Composition of them.
Yep. So pretty interesting. Like, he's got a pretty good body of work. I know this is like his first published record of a music for a video game, and they actually like honored him in Japan. Like Namco actually worked with the company to release like a vinyl of Splatterhouse because they wanted to like give him an honor of having like a published record. So I thought that was pretty cool. It's pretty interesting.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And the vinyl's expensive as shit. It's like $75, but it's like Splatterhouse art on this like lime green vinyl. It's cool as shit. I kind of want one, honestly. But the soundtrack itself, the best way I can describe it, like it's spooky music. It's like rhythmic over the tones of like beeps and bops on the bass behind it. It's really fast. It like gets you prepared for like, all right, we're gonna fight something. Here we go. But you'll have your like typical high note kind of spooky alternating 16th pattern to like get you pumped. But it's like a spooky Halloween soundtrack. But the nice thing about it, it is very like varied. God, that's horrible. It's varied. It'll slow down and speed up. I think it's appropriate. Like when you go into the sewers, it slows down quite a bit. It's kind of got like an eerie, like higher pitched bells and tones that you're used to in a horror movie. But again, like when it's putting you in a boss, it's going to be fast paced and rhythmic. Or when you're fighting the poltergeist furniture, it'll slow down and kind of turn to like a eerie, creepy. The music's actually really, really solid for this, especially for the limitations. Like Turbo Grafx is not known for its sound at all. And I mean, the comparable thing would be the NES, where Turbo Grafx tried to kind of get away from like that chiptune sound, and most of the times like it didn't work. This is a really, really solid soundtrack, especially for the hardware, in my opinion. You guys have thoughts about the soundtrack?
Yeah, so I don't think it's one of those where you're gonna be able to name songs off it and be like all timer. But I think that's just consistently good, like absolutely. And like unlike a lot of games from this time, like every song definitely fits the stage or fits the section of the game you're playing. And I think especially in a game where you're like pushing the pace, when you have that music that adds to it, and it's just like it's like people talk about Doom Eternal and Doom 2016's like soundtracks and how they like really add to the gameplay. I think this has got a similar vibe going on. I don't think there's any like iconic songs coming out of here that we're gonna put in the Hall of Fame, but everything fit and everything like did add to your experience. So anytime you can do that, like hats off. That's the whole point of adding the musical score to a game. So
yeah, for a horror game, you want like atmospheric music, and it does a really, really serviceable job of that. I agree, it's not my favorite soundtrack of all time, but I think it's good. I think it might be even a little better than good, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's you said solid. I think it's super solid. It's dependable.
I think appropriate's the best word for it. Like it fits the tone of the game, and then the way it kind of maneuvers around the levels with the player, it fits really, really well. Like it's so appropriate. It's the best
music
word
has
for it.
definitely got a lot more going for it than the sound department, for sure.
Oh yeah, I agree. Honestly, the biggest letdown for me is the sound.
100%.
Most notable for me, just right off the bat, let's just get it out of the way, is the weapons. How satisfying it feels to smack somebody with a 2x4 and just get the laziest sound ever.
Yeah,
sucks.
It's so disappointing. I mean, just think of so many games, like even older games than this, like Mario jumping, just that sound, it's like, it adds to the momentum of the jump and everything. So like you're playing this and you're mashing, it feels great, it looks great, it sounds like garbage.
Yeah, like just even pushing the button and just feeling like you're supposed to feel that pop and just getting, it sucks, because on the arcade you get like a smack, and then once they smack against the background of the wall and splat, you get a splat and you get like a drip. None of the sound.
So they remixed the sound for the home port?
Yeah, they had to because
So
of limitations.
lacking. Yeah.
And then censorship's what they say. Again, everyone talks about the graphics being censored. Like they
Sounds
changed some of the
terrible.
enemies. They took religious imagery like crosses out of the game. I don't care. It plays the same. But like the immersion of the sound, especially with such a solid soundtrack, for me, the biggest in this game is the sound.
That shotgun blast is weak.
The shotgun blast is actually one of the better ones.
It's one of the better
Yeah.
ones. It's still weak though. I mean,
I do remember
Compared to
the
the
shotgun
feel-
blast being like,
Yeah.
is this, what am I shooting, pellets?
That's the
Yeah.
thing. Compared to the feel of the shotgun.
pellet gun?
'cause it feels awesome. But
Yeah.
like, think about Doom's the shotgun in video games. I think we can all agree on this. Like part of that's that, and it's just it feels and it's the whole package, and you're just like, yeah. This is like when you're shooting, you're like it's cool, but then you're just like,
It's the feeling, man. Like if you play this game on mute and you're like, oh, this feels awesome. I know exactly what that's going to sound like when I turn it on. And then you unmute it. It again, especially compared to the arcade version, like the sound is awesome. Like the only way it could get cool in the arcades if they added like a Q*bert element or like where Q*bert falls off the arcade and like a rocker kicks the arcade. If they would have added that for this game when you splat an enemy with a 2x4, like that would have been killer. It's
or the whole thing shakes and the poltergeist move stuff.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be so cool. But it's such a contrast of the way it feels to use the weapons versus the sound of the weapons. All of them, even like throwing a spear, just like boing, like it's a spring. Like it's such a weird choice. For me, the only standout sound effects are the shotgun because, like we already touched on, it sounds better, but it's not great. It is loud, but it's kind of just like a loud crack. It's no different than like the fire when the lightning hits the trees and they start rolling. And then the one that actually is good is like when you jump in the water and you splash. Mm-hmm. The splash kind of has like an echo to it. It's actually really, really nice. Like in the sewer environment.
Sounds like sewer water instead of just like a glass of water.
Instead of just like throwing a rock in a lake. Yeah, they did a good job with that. That's like the only standout sound for me. Every other sound is just a disappointment, and it's not great.
And it is disappointing, especially in a horror-based game, because sound is a big part of your ambience and a big part of your environment.
I think they relied too heavy on the soundtrack for the atmosphere.
They had to, though, because the Turbo Grafx has pretty, like you said earlier, it does have limitations in sound. It's like the one definite knock on the console.
Yeah.
But it's something that it takes an average horror game to a good horror game. It takes a good horror game to a great horror game if the sound's on fire.
Well, I think any media with horror sound, it's so dependent on sound. I mean, that's what's creating your atmosphere, and even like if you watch movies that don't have sound or music playing in a scene, the whole buildup is based off of like what you see silently, but also those tiny things you hear in the environment. So on one hand, like it's cool that the soundtrack was good.
Yeah.
But what it would have been like if we got the banging sound effects and a little less on the soundtrack.
My thing is, the soundtrack's so varied, right? When it slows down and it gets creepy, you're going to need those sounds to like amplify
for sure.
that feeling and that dread. And it doesn't do it. It is a big knock for me in this game. Everybody instantly goes to the censorship of the graphics. Like, that's not it for me. The sin of the Turbo Grafx ports, the sound is not great.
I'd agree with that.
All right, guys, the big one, the price and collectability for this game. And I thought I knew about this game as far as this return, but the more you dig, the more wild it gets. And spoiler alert, probably after talking to you guys is when I come to my conclusion for is it worth it? Because it's a head scratcher for me.
Yeah, this one is interesting. This one does have like a lot going for it and against it. So
let's get the facts out of the way, and then we'll discuss. The facts. So just the Hue card, just the Turbo Grafx-16 card itself, the cartridge, if you will. It's going for about $75. If you want the jewel case with the manual, you're looking at $125, $150 in that range, depending on condition. My app said it's going for $130, but recent eBays are more of like $150 range. So the interesting thing about Turbo Grafx games, I think a lot of these apps count them as complete if it has jewel case and the card and the manual. Every Turbo Grafx game came in a cardboard paper box where this jewel case slid inside. There is only 3 copies on eBay right now that have a paper box, and they are not cheap. They're about $100 just for the box alone, is what my app says. And the recent sales on eBay for the last 3 of the box are $338 on bids, $294 on bids, and then there's one that was Canadian. I don't remember the conversion. $270 Canadian. I don't know what that. Yeah, that's asking price. So if you want it complete the paper box, like you're going to spend some money. I was fortunate enough to get mine with the box for $100, but this was almost 8 years ago at this point, I feel like.
And you knew the people.
That's the thing. I bought it from a toy store, and they knew like Turbo Grafx was collectible back then, but I got this and like 6 other games and the console for $300. And back then I was like, oh my God, I just spent $300 on this. But like now, dude, the console's worth $300. So I mean, I got lucky. I stole it. But, for the time, obviously,
it's
deal,
different. Though. You still got a deal back then. Turbo's always been collectible. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, but I see this game often. I don't think it's a rare game. I think it's more desired for TurboGrafx because it's the game that most people. It's the quintessential TurboGrafx game. It's not the pack-in game, but it's like, hey, what's the first game that comes to mind when you think TurboGrafx? It's probably going to be Splatterhouse, right? Now
here's the one I went out and bought when I got my Turbo. So.
Yeah, here's where it gets tricky though. So again, this port is exclusive to the TurboGrafx with the changes, the graphics, and all that. For the Towns Marty version, for reference, there's only one on eBay right now that's complete with the box, and the asking price is $750. The last couple that sold were just a jewel case and the CD were $270 to $300.
What about the Turbo Duo? I'm sorry, not Turbo Duo. Forgive me. The
PC Engine.
PC Engine.
That's
a more realistic comparison. Because Towns Marty, like we're talking Turbo's.
I got you.
Turbo's obscure. We're talking like ungodly obscure for Towns Marty. So like
the first one.
Yeah.
It's less.
It should be
under 100.
It should be.
Yeah.
More people imported the PC Engine because like TurboGrafx, you can't find them, but you can import the PC Engine.
Yeah, because it was a successful console in Japan. Like it was not like it was here. Like it had a very long shelf life in Japan. It had.
Oh, dude, it's complete with the jewel case for $60 on bids. Pfft. Yeah, it's cheap on.
It's a lot more. There's a lot more of those than there are the North American versions.
Trying to find what the box looks like. Just the cartridge sold for $49. I love the Japanese artwork too. I'll say that it's more in line with the arcade artwork. I mean, for one, it's got like the white mask. Damn, only 2 sold recently. I'm trying to find one with the box. I mean, I imagine the box is going to bring it up significantly higher. Just that's how it is. Like TurboGrafx games with the cardboard box, like you don't see them. The ones that I have are the only ones I've seen personally because I literally buy them every time I see them because they don't pop up unless you pay an exorbitant amount of money on eBay, which that's not my way of collecting. I mean, if it is to you, hats off, but like you're going to pay for your TurboGrafx boxes. It's just kind of the way it is. Now where it gets really interesting, we talked about how uncommon these arcade cabinets are, right? I can find one for sale on the internet. It's $4,000. It's been restored. It's not original.
I feel like it's not awful for
It's actually a pretty good
It's
deal.
not original. It's restored. Still cool. So again, this is
what part of it's not original?
It's new artwork. It's new marquee. But I mean, it's
just a rebuild.
Yeah, it's
board.
rebuilt. Yep.
Board with a rebuild.
Yeah. Which I mean, there's only 100.
Original board.
Is it?
Yeah, it's original board.
And it's modeled like the original cabinet, or is it?
Yeah,
just original?
It's the original woodwork and everything. It's custom. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like reproduction almost would be like a better.
Again, the website I found the arcade thing from. When we find out, I have a source.
But again, that goes into the whole scarcity thing. That's $4,000 for the obscure, popular.
I don't really try to take arcade cabinets into account when talking about games because, like, you just
whole other animal.
Sure, you can say 100, but
how many arcade cabinets you got?
It could be 4. Like,
how many arcade cabinets I have?
Nobody collects arcade cabinets. I mean, they do.
I got a couple, but nothing crazy.
That's why I didn't ask you. But.
Not $4,000 ones.
You did. You asked me how many I had.
I was talking about him. I asked you and me because we have 0. And like a couple I'd love to have, but it's just not something you can easily collect.
Right. So my argument basically is like, if you want to, this is an exclusive version of this game. I couldn't find the LCD handle. I was curious and I tried looking for that one. I couldn't find it. But if you want to play that TurboGrafx game, the PC Engine version is significantly cheaper. The console itself is going to be about $200.
Let me put it in this perspective. I don't think about arcade cabinets when talking about collectability because 100% of the time the arcade cabinet's going to be more expensive. So like, why would I?
Right.
Why would I seek that one as an alternative?
Yeah, and like space. But it was giantbomb.com said that there's only 100 arcade cabinets distributed in America. So like $4,000 for one of 100.
Giant Bomb's pretty reliable.
Yeah,
it's not that crazy, honestly.
It's actually a pretty good deal. If you got $4,000 laying around, Brian.
If you're a true patriot and support not censoring,
bro, you know how many games I can buy for $4,000?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Again, this is an exclusive version, even separate. It's technically the PC Engine version is not the same as the TurboGrafx version. It's more in line with the arcade version. So this is one of those things. If you want to pay for it, if you want to play it, you're gonna have to pay for it.
We're at like 10 minutes left.
Cool. Well, I got you. With the exception, there are easier ways to play this now in times. Like I said, it was released for the Wii, so if you still have it installed on your Wii, you're good there. If not, the store's closed, so that's unfortunate. The easiest way to play this game, if you buy the Splatterhouse remake for the PS3 or the Xbox 360, that game's going around $50-$60 complete in box. You can actually unlock Splatterhouse 1, 2, and 3 as like a museum mode. So that's probably the most affordable way to play all 3 games, because 2 and 3 are ungodly expensive. Like, if you just want to play it, that's your best bet. The last and most simple solution is Namco Museum Arcade Pack for the Switch. The arcade version of Splatterhouse is on there, and that's going for about $17 complete in box right now. So I'll say this. If you just want to play Splatterhouse, don't care if it's the Turbo Grafx version or the arcade version, the Namco collection is great. I own it because I wanted to play the arcade version. $17 all day. I got it for $10 on Black Friday. Like, what's up? Like, great deal. Fun just to play it. As far as is it worth it, Nate or Barry, what are your thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah?
All right, here's my reasoning, because you both looked at me like, what?
I'm surprised, yeah.
So this game is on a console that's not very common. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of people collect for Turbo. And if they do, Splatterhouse is low on the pecking order. There's a lot more rare things out there.
Yes.
Darkwing, Bonks, Magical Chase. Like, Darkwing. There's a lot more rare pieces out there for a Turbo. 2, people who are horror fans are like cult fans. It doesn't matter what it is. If it touches the genre of horror, they're just a fiend for it. 3, Splatterhouse only came out on a Turbo. You know, other than like, as far as like North America.
Right.
If you're doing a North America collection, North America complete collection of Turbo or whatever, like, this game did not come out on another console. It was not really ported to another console as a standalone. You gotta buy a crappy Splatterhouse game for PS3 just to get access to a digital whatever version of it. We can't buy it digitally anywhere.
Yeah. And it's the arcade version, it's not even the Turbo version.
As far as just a singular physical release game, like, Splatterhouse is only on Turbo. So $150 top. What was it maximum with the box?
With the paper box?
Yeah.
About $300.
Okay, so $150 if you just want like the jewel case
Most
and the
people
game.
consider that complete in box on Turbo Grafx, to be fair. Just a jewel case and the manual, because the manual's in the jewel case.
That's a point of contention for a lot of people. But
me, I'm like, give me that paper box. But I'm also a psychopath.
Too poor, so I'm like, I got a complete copy.
Even 300, like, that's not anything compared to what you paying for some of these other games.
For Turbo, that's not bad. Like,
that's cheap for Turbo, quite frankly.
So, and for it to be an iconic game for Turbo, because it is Splatterhouse, because it has that history of controversy within its content, coming over here, not having a lot of options to play it on arcade, one of the most violent games at the time, like, people remember it for that. I don't think this would be a hard sell for someone who wants to buy Turbo games. If you're not interested in buying Turbo games and you're not interested in horror games, like, just stay away from it. There's no point of you even looking at this game.
Yeah.
But for a collector who's like, I like Turbo Grafx, like, this seems like a necessity.
Yeah.
There's not a crazy amount of games that are on Turbo that are exclusive to the Turbo, because it was kind of a difficult console to sell. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you've got ones that are, like, even Darkwing is not exclusive to this console. There's other versions that are out there for Darkwing, but it's still like a 400 complete. I don't even know if that includes the box. Now,
I know the last sold one sold for $1,000. Don't ask me how I know that.
That one was sealed, Brian.
That was a long time
ago. That one was
That'd
sealed.
Be $5,000 now.
Y'all want to talk about mistakes?
I would just spend on it though.
But even then, like, Darkwing has other consoles that you could play this game on. They may not be completely the same, but they're similar. And like, Splatterhouse doesn't really have that. You'd have to wait. Like, people had to wait into the PlayStation 3 era for anything to even come out to play this game again.
Yeah.
So I don't see why this wouldn't be a staple Turbo game for a Turbo collector. It would be hard for someone to convince me it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't like Turbo, and I don't like horror. I wouldn't buy this personally. This would be nothing you'd see on my search history. But for someone who is in either of those categories, it seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my argument. It's very much in line with that as far as like staple Turbo game. I've said it in the past when it comes to the is it worth it? Like, if you have to play for it, then yes, automatically by default, it's worth it. My counter argument's this: like, if you just want to play it, I think there's better options, cheaper options, because the game's short. It's very short. You can beat the game in like 27 minutes, 30 minutes, right? If you know what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest knock on what you're paying for. But
yeah, as a collectability standpoint, though, like, Turbo Grafx has always been expensive. When I got this game and like system for $300, like, back then, $300 was like what? I don't even know, like $1,800 a day. Like, Turbo Grafx seems to retain value for the time being.
it's kind of
Now, my caveat is, how many Turbo collectors are there going to be in the future?
That was kind of the point I was going to bring up. So, like, I think there's a lot going for this. Horror, Barry just touched on it. Like, horror people are maniacs. This is the only way to get the first one. Friday the 13th collectors are going to want this game.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Turbo people definitely going to want this game. This is, for full disclosure, I own 2 Turbo games. This is the only one I own that's complete because it's the first one I went out and bought for my Turbo. It is a series that they've obviously tried to bring back unsuccessfully, to be honest, but like it is a series that's on people's mind still. And if you're in a certain age group, like people remember this game, so it has a lineage. The obscurity is always going to keep stuff fairly expensive. Like there's not a lot, even though this is fairly common as far as a Turbo game, there's still not a lot of Turbo stuff out there. When you see it, you go, "Oh wow, Turbo Grafx!" Like you don't see it everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's all. Like financially, like yeah, this will stay the same. Now we're at that point in the year where spooky stuff starts getting a little more expensive because you'll pay for Halloween stuff too. So like, I think this is one of those games where it's a seasonal buy. Don't buy it in the fall. Don't buy it towards the end of the year because like stuff does go up horror because people buy Halloween stuff.
Oh,
interesting
if
to
you're
see it.
interested in
Yeah.
horror, never buy anything in August, September, or October.
So like I'm really
never.
It's one of those games that'd be fun if you guys hear the episode to go look at the price and be like, huh, you will see a spike every year. And like Barry and I were at the game store long enough to where we'd see stuff. It's like we gotta go repricing these Castlevania games and
Cold dead winter of January, people.
$3 DVDs are going to be $6-7 now because people
Yep.
will overpay they get their horror fix. So it's
Because they forget, I don't know, I guess they forget that, it's spooky season once a year, and they're like, oh my god, I forgot it existed yet again.
so yeah, that's an interesting thing. But I say the negatives, like this is an obscure. Like I think Brian kind of started the point I was going to bring up initially was like there's not a lot of Turbo collectors, and if you are, hopefully you got grandfathered in. There's no one chasing this beast because if you're going to start Turbo collecting now, I feel so sorry for you.
If you're going to start collecting now, I feel sorry
Like,
for you.
even if you're just going part only, collecting in general, correct. But we're talking like Turbo is a whole new animal. Like part only, we're talking like you better at least be prepared to spend on most games $125 like for good ones.
Well, and I think Turbo has that kind of same realm of
It's a lot of games.
difficulty that like cardboard based games have, but also not only does it have a cardboard box that goes to it, but the jewel case is specific for Turbo. It's not like a jewel case that you can swap out with another CD.
Right.
Like it's got the little
outside
flap
sticker.
the
Plastic
little
arm.
flap thing that
Yeah.
holds it in there in the back, and then the outside sticker. It is a sticker. It's
Yeah.
not like inside of the case. So even inside of that, I feel like that's why people see it as complete, which I don't agree with. Like,
Don't either.
if it originally came with an outside box, like that's complete. Sorry, buddy. You guys are gonna talk about stupid ads and whatnot, Nintendo games, and not a whole box for Turbo, but whatever.
Right.
But like, I feel like this one is even worse. So that's why you see a lot of people, and especially you see it with younger people who are going into 64. They're like, I have no intention of getting it complete. I just want the cart. I want to be able to play it. Like, that's fine for me. The rest is too difficult. It's the same with Turbo. If you're going to get into Turbo, you're going to have to settle with carts at this point. It's like, it's going to be difficult to find them complete with a case that still is intact, with a label that's intact.
I mean, bro, some of my boxes are rough, but
Cardboard box.
bought them because I saw it.
Like, of all the consoles I can think of, I think Turbo struggles the most with having complete good condition items.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like A, there's not a whole lot of them to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
B, like people who got this for Christmas instead of a Nintendo were probably pissed and didn't take great care. But
They're bitter about it. Yeah,
there's probably 10 people that are like, "Oh, I think give me the Turbo for Christmas." Like people who got this, like, "Here, kid."
Like, and there are people who love the Turbo. I mean, if you ever watched any of Happy Console Gamer videos, like, he is a PC Engine nut. So there are people out there that just genuinely enjoy it so much, but I think this one struggles the most with conditional collectors.
I think that's fair.
I think this one's very much so like, yes, but. So like for me, this is worth it. But if it's like, you have to kind of be in that group of like you collect horror stuff, you happen to be collecting Turbo stuff. Like I don't think is this worth it for like just to have on your shelf?
Mine is the conditional yes, but how much money do you have?
That's the thing. All right, this is it's for Turbo. This is actually cheap. I mean, we're talking $330 if you want to complete in box, complete one, and that's like, oh, it's not that bad. Like there's a lot of games that like, huh, $330 you can go buy some stellar games that are like going to continue to just keep climbing. So it is an interesting one. I spent around $75 for mine with jewel case. no paper box, and felt like I got a good deal at the time. Like, seems like I did. So,
You got that from a pretty good store.
did I buy that off you?
Yeah.
I don't remember doing it. All right, right on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's worth it overall. There is a lot of positives going for it. I think horror stuff does retain value, like historically, and I will see as far as generations go, because like horror is kind of in a little mini resurgence. Barry brought that up earlier in this episode, so like horror stuff might be worth hanging on to.
Not even in the game, market,
general,
but movies
yeah.
too, like TV shows. There's a lot of horror, like good horror stuff coming out. Like, I'm not a horror person, and I've had the displeasure of being with someone who's like, I love horror movies, let's watch them, and I'm like, please, I don't. But now I'm in the boat of like, I'm more open to it, and there are some good ones that have came out, or games that have came out too, that are just like, oh, these are, I'm playing, Phasmophobia, which is like not even a AAA game, but I'm more open to the idea, and you have more fun with it, and I can see why people enjoy these kinds of things. So like, in this time, there is a resurgence of horror, and there's a big push for people to go see it in the theater, so we retain them in the theaters instead of going, because like straight to DVD kills stuff. Straight to DVD's always killed stuff, and that's how it is in streaming, where it's going straight to streaming and it kills stuff. Yeah. So we'll see, but I think horror is in a very strong foothold right now.
Horror is, I think Brian touched on my concern with saying yes initially, is where's the Turbo Grafx audience in the future? I don't think there's going to be a lot. Now, it's always going to be rare and obscure, so that's got stuff going for it. And this is, like everyone's pretty much said, this is like, oh, Turbo Grafx Splatterhouse. But, like,
I think
20 years from now, people are going to have trouble remembering an NES, let alone a Turbo Grafx.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you didn't?
I was just say, I think the counter argument for that is there is now a viable, cheap option to play this game on the Switch for $17. Like, if you're just curious about it and you want to check it out, all day.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of how this caters to collectors and not just people who play.
Yeah, right.
It's a very different thing. Like, we like playing games, but at the end of the day, like, this entire episode is like for a collector.
Yeah, just the point, proving the game you're playing right now, Baldur's Gate 3, you already said you're buying on PlayStation. Like,
yeah,
I've
bought 2 copies of it. Well, it's not physical.
On PlayStation, it's not?
No.
What?
No.
Yeah.
Digital only, homie.
Edit that out.
$70 digital only.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's where we're going, though, unfortunately.
But it's like, that is a good question of like, where are the collectors going? And I've said it before. I'm confident that everything in the 8 and 16-bit era except for Super Nintendo is going to die off.
There's like probably a select few that aren't Super Nintendo that will die off.
Absolutely die off. I mean, you have to think like
Sonic will have his little moment.
It's going to get to that point where it is so expensive.
Yeah.
That we don't even think. What do you think about comic books? Who's out here buying Golden Age? Nobody.
As much as we love them, none of us.
Because it's so far out. I mean, even Silver Age.
Silver's getting there. Like, I'm snatching up
I
copper
have
and bronze.
one Silver Age book.
I have one Golden Age book.
And that's the only one I'm going to buy.
No
like,
comment.
I'm not interested in Silver Age.
I got a lot of Silver Age.
It's too old for me.
It's my favorite.
It's too expensive for me. The amount of maintenance that I would have to do with those, like, I'm going to buy the collected edition. I'm just going to read it in a collected edition. And that's the kind of collector I am. And that's where we're going to get in the future. The problem, though, is are we going to get collected editions of some of this stuff that's older? And I think there's the disparity between some other...
Huge difference with our medium of video games then.
Look how long it took them to bring this to a modern quote console for the Wii. Like, you're right, and it's going to keep getting worse.
And kind of just a little side note, the only thing we're preserving well is fairly modern stuff still. We're getting Red Dead remasters, and we're not getting
re-releases,
not
remasters.
Re-release.
We're not
we're
not getting old stuff. We're getting stuff from when we were young.
Exactly your point. We're not getting we're getting a third remaster of Last of Us that came out in the last freaking 10 years or whatever.
We're not going back and preserving Atari. No. We're not getting Mappy remastered.
So
second Mappy reference. Wow.
It's hard. I don't think it would be outside of the question of thinking people are still going to be looking for it in 20 years. But the same idea as I think it's going to be a very specific kind of person.
It'll be priced. I think what you're kind of saying, it'll be priced at that point already. I don't think it's just going to like just tank because no one cares. It's just priced for a specific audience.
I'll say this. So because of the hoopla involved with like the supposed ban, there's a little bit of extra, sugar on top for this game to sweeten the deal. The market's on the way down right now. This game's only dropped like $10. So like it's not going down like some of these are.
It's one that'll retain.
If you look at a lot of the other Turbo games, we're talking, $5-10 differentials, like not. I think this one does have like some extra added benefits to give it that long-term hold. Like as a collectible piece and a talking point, it's got historical value being the first game with like a censor label on it, censorship in general. I think it's going to retain some value in that regard. As a collectible piece, I do think it's worth it. For playing the game, different question, I think. There's cheaper ways that if you just want to play it. But as a collecting purchase and like Turbo Grafx guy, like, yeah, like worth it to me.
I think overall it's definitely worth it. I just think there is some stuff you have to consider before you say 100% definitively yes.
My argument's always been like, if it's the only way to play it, you're gonna have to pay for it. Automatically makes it worth it. Like this version of this game and the historical significance attached to a specific Turbo Grafx version.
I think you take all that out and just look at the price point for Turbo. It's just pretty cheap. So
Yeah.
like probably worth
It's
it.
an exclusive Turbo
It's the
game.
same argument
Yeah.
waiting for Die Hard for Saturn. Like that's pretty cheap for like an iconic Saturn
Right,
game.
and like if this was Bonks, I would have a whole different mindset because Bonks is on so many other consoles.
So expensive. My God.
Yeah.
So
Block
like,
4 is
so
gonna
like,
ape
Well, it's
shit.
expensive on everything.
like, do I want it on Turbo? Or I don't have to ask the question. Do I want Splatterhouse on Turbo? What are my options?
Right.
Yep.
Go
Okay,
Thomas Marty.
I'm throttled. Okay, that I've got one option for
Yep.
an original Splatterhouse just by itself.
So overall, I think we all said yes. Did not expect that, but it's very cool. That's why I picked this one. There's surface level. It's kind of like, okay, arcade beat 'em up. There's not a lot to talk about.
Bro,
but,
we
like,
need to pick some no's.
Yeah.
We need to pick some every single game. We're just like, yeah, it's worth it. We got to pick some no's out here, man.
Oh, I got you next time.
What are you picking
What are we
next
picking?
time?
Guy game.
No,
I
are you
wanna-
really picking Guy Game?
Oh, what was that? What's that you said?
I want to keep. I want
You
to
said
keep
no?
doing the podcast. So
we
you guys don't pick the guy.
I'm not gonna.
But I also
want
want to play games I like.
Well, yeah, it's just funny. So
Don't let Nate pick
we don't have to
64
record
games.
it. Like my track record's not been great, especially this year of picking good games, but they've all still been worth it, which is kind of funny. Like as horrible as we talk about, oh God, Daikatana, like we all said, yeah.
Splatterhouse, worth it. Collective, yes. What do y'all think? How y'all feel about old Splatty? Let us know in the comments on social media.
No, don't do it.
Send us your splats. Any feedback, always welcome. Check us out on Discord. You can directly communicate with us. It's a blast on Discord, let me tell you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. What's next in the tank?
Next episode, we're gonna have an inspired episode by Rhythm Encounter. If you've ever heard of it or you have not, Rhythm Encounter is a podcast by RPG Fan where they go through and just play soundtracks from various RPG games. It talks about them. So we're doing an episode inspired by that format of our favorite video game soundtracks, music, songs from some of our favorites. And they might be pretty popular, but at this point, I don't care. We're just going to share with you games that we think have phenomenal soundtracks and talk about them.
Yeah, this one's been requested a little bit in the Discord, so
Yes, this one was requested
yeah,
For sure.
give the people what they want.
by a Discordee
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys participate in the Discord, you can get what you want.
or what
Within
you
reason.
You
don't.
guys already picked a game you're all going to say no on.
Guy
We'll
game.
find one.
Guy game.
Not the guy game.
Don't pick the guy game. Insta-ban. Thank you guys for listening to the Collecti-Bros podcast. We appreciate it. Tune in next time for some music. Collecti-Bros out.